That's right. So welcome to Let's Talk About Books.
Yeah.
And we did decide to discuss nonfiction books. That's primarily what I read. If it's a true story, like I'm in, that's all it takes for me. And there's science, rather, there's research to back up the importance of reading nonfiction.
And one of the things that we noticed is that at the elementary level, there are a lot of elementary kids reading nonfiction books. Every little kid comes in and they say, I want a shark book, I want a dog book, I want a book about princesses. But as they get to the high school level, that kind of starts to peter out a little bit. And so we are really trying to emphasize the importance of reading nonfiction, especially books that read like they are fiction.
But what happens is they don't lose that interest in sharks or princesses. It's just that they start going to Google for it instead of books. And so that's what we want to do, is promote learning more in depth about those things that they might just quickly look up online and read that Wikipedia definition. But we have books and stories, like really pull them in and increase their depth of knowledge on certain topics.
And probably our most beloved topics are those topics that students can live vicariously through. They love to read stories about people who've gone through great struggles, because they can learn from those stories of all of the things that those people have overcome. So those are some of the books that we're going to talk about today.
That's right. So I'm going to start with one of my favorites, I Who Did Not Die. This is not necessarily new, but it is way underread. I think everyone needs to read this book. So I Who Did Not Die takes place during the Iran-Iraq War. And Zahed is a 13-year-old Iranian soldier. And it is his job to clear the battlefield of any surviving fallen soldiers on the other side, right? Any Iraqi soldiers. So after this particularly bloody battle, he's walking through the area trying to find survivors and just praying to God that he doesn't find any. And he does. He finds Naja, who, again, Zahed is only 13. Naja is this grown adult. And even though they speak different languages, Naja starts clutching at his pocket where he's got a copy of the Quran. And he's like, I'm a Muslim. Like, we're brothers. And Zahed realizes at that moment he has the power to let this man live or die. And he chooses to let him live. And not only does he not kill him, but he actively works to save his life. He goes and he gets morphine. He brings in blood for a blood transfusion. He takes a knife out of the side of the wall in a building and like plunges it into his arm so he can give Naja the IV. And we're distracted. I'm easily distracted. Sorry, there are kids walking around. So what was I saying?
Oh, he's helping him to survive on the battlefield.
Blood transfusion, yes. And then they go their separate ways. And so over the course of the war, they both become prisoners of war. They're both tortured. They lose their family. The war ends. They go back to their home countries, and they really don't have anything there for them, but they have the hope that there might be something better. So they both move to Canada, and they both end up in the same PTSD clinic at the same time, and their eyes lock. And they know right away, because they've thought of each other across all these years. They know, they're like, you're the man who saved my life. He's like, you're the man I saved, and I've been wondering about you. And so 20 years later, they meet. They now live down the street from one another. They're best friends, like brothers. And it's really a testament to the choices we make and how they can, literally save and change lives. Love this book. And I like to say, just because you know the end doesn't mean I've ruined the book for you, because I knew the ending before I started the book, and it's still amazing.
You'll definitely need a box of tissues with that one.
Definitely.
For sure.
Definitely.
So I'm going to talk about this book. It's called A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea. And so this is my book talk I always give the kids. So it all starts in 2011 as oppressive regimes are brought down by protesting citizens in what we now call the Arab Spring. And a group of teenage boys just laughingly spray paint anti-government, anti-Syrian government slogans on a wall. And they go home, they don't think anything about it. But that small teenage prank actually is what is the spark for what we now know as the Syrian Civil War, which has displaced over 6 million Syrian citizens, one of which is Doa al-Zamal. And this is her story. It starts off, she has a very idyllic childhood in Syria. She's going to school, her family has a business, and of course, almost overnight, as the Syrian government comes in to try to put down the protests, there are chemical weapons attacks, and their homes are bombed. They have to travel to different areas of the region to try to get away, and they just can't. So they have to flee to Egypt. And she starts to try to build a life there, and that actually takes a turn for the worse too. And so really, at some point, her only hope is to be one of those people that we saw on the news who were fleeing the Middle East through these tiny little fishing vessels that were sinking in the Mediterranean. And this is her story. We know that she survives. It's obviously one refugee's incredible story of love, loss, and survival. But I can't imagine what she had to go through to be able to fight to survive, because her boat does go down, and she's found clinging to 2 children in the Mediterranean. And that is what is giving her hope, hopefully. And I know that we have students here at McNeil who have gone through similar situations. And so I feel like this type of book really helps build empathy for those students that are coming in that, we don't understand the situations that they've been through. So I really recommend this book. Oh, it's also written by Melissa Fleming, who, I have to make sure I get this right, is the chief spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So she really knows her stuff. And if you're just tuning in, we are live at the Jinx Lacey Memorial Library at McNeil High School, and this is Let's Talk About Books.
Okay, and we're focusing on nonfiction, and I think, as we said, one of the things I love most about nonfiction is people's stories, but really, life is made up of the decisions we make all along the way. Like, your life is the sum total of the decisions you make. And no book makes that more apparent than the other, Wes Moore. So Wes Moore is a West Point graduate, Rhodes Scholar, and the year he's named a Rhodes Scholar, he's reading the newspaper, looking for his announcement, and he finds an article written about another man also named Wes Moore. And so they are both born in Baltimore, blocks away from one another. They were both raised by single moms. As young kids, they both had trouble with the law. But the author, Wes Moore, is headed for Oxford. And the other Wes Moore has just been imprisoned for life for murder. And so the author wonders, why is he in prison and I'm going to Oxford? So he actually goes to the prison and he meets Wes Moore and he talks to him, and they build a friendship. And this book is a narrative of their lives, like parallel to one another, and kind of the choices they made and the decisions that they made given their choices, and how that led to the divergence of their lives, if you will. Really amazing. The other Wes Moore.
And so when we're talking about books like The Other Wes Moore, we're talking about some things that deal with injustice, systemic racism, and things like that. And in our district, we're really focusing on equity task force. We've got equity committees here at McNeil. I know we've got one that's going at the district level. And that really got me to thinking that I don't remember a lot of the history from so long ago and talking about some of those systems that were put into place. And so I was given this book written by Henry Louis Gates, who is a prominent Harvard professor, and it's called Dark Sky Rising, Reconstruction and the Dawn of Jim Crow. What's really interesting about this book is that in 2019, he wrote an adult version of this book called Stony the Road, Reconstruction, White Supremacy, and the Rise of Jim Crow. And that book has received many starred reviews. It's on all the top nonfiction lists. But sometimes when you think about bringing a book like that to a high school, it almost seems a little daunting because it's very dense and very fact-heavy. And so what authors like Henry Louis Gates are doing are taking a lot of that information and they're putting it into what we call young adult nonfiction. And this is that putting together of all of that information from his adult book into a young adult version, because we all know that we're flipping through and looking at pictures in the nonfiction books anyway. And so the young adult version is just less dense and has a little bit more illustrations to it. But it is all about what led to the Civil War, Reconstruction. I had forgotten that there were actually 4 acts of Reconstruction that Congress was trying to put into place, and they failed. And really, I feel like when you look back at what this book is discussing, the things that Congress was doing after the Civil War, they were trying to put together things to help the freed slaves, but they were met with so much derision and divisiveness at that time. Change is not easy, but when you look back at the things that they tried to put in place, you think about how different the United States might be at this time now in present day if they had actually been able to fulfill what they originally had wanted to try to do. And then it also talks about how when those acts of Reconstruction failed, really what we have, we start with Plessy versus Ferguson and the installation really of those Jim Crow laws that really have led to what we now know is the systemic racism in the United States that has really been plaguing a lot of communities and things like that that we're really trying to focus on and work with and rebuild. So I really recommend this book for those of us who it's been a really long time since we've read about Reconstruction. And obviously this is the young adult version, but Stony the Road is the adult version. And so it'll have the same information just at a higher adult level, which I think is great for students or for adults who want to go in more depth with those topics.
Yeah.
They can go to those
Well,
other.
I would say that's just more detailed, but
Yeah.
for me, like young adult, like that's my.
Yeah.
A lot of times, that's all the information I need. It's giving me the information, and it's highly readable, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna lighten the mood a little bit. All right, with how to. So I've got this great book for like armchair scientists, right? So the people who like to sit around and ponder the universe and think about what's possible. So that's what Randall Munroe does, and the subtitle is Absurd Scientific Advice for Common Real World Problems. So for example, if you were trying to figure out how you could jump the highest you possibly could jump, Randall Munroe has figured that out. You just need to create a bodysuit shaped like a sailplane, made of fiberglass and carbon resin. That's all. Then you go to the Andes Mountains, you go to the highest peak, you catch a ridge lift wind as it's coming in, you swoop along with that, and that will literally like propel you to the stratosphere.
Super easy.
But yeah, that's how humans could do that. Or what I found, one of the things I found most interesting was an article, or one of the excerpts, if you will. You can tell how old a person is. We know this by their teeth, right? But someone born in the 1950s versus someone born in the 90s, their teeth are very different. Because at the end of World War II, we had the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We had large-scale nuclear testing. And so all that radioactivity is in the atmosphere, and that goes all around the Earth. So that's absorbed by your teeth. And then the use of leaded gas, which peaked in 72, that also is in the atmosphere and absorbed by your teeth. So someone born in the 50s has radioactive teeth filled with lead versus like someone in the 90s who's younger with after environmental acts and changes, non-proliferation treaties, yeah, as much less. Right? It is. I know.
If you're just tuning in, we are live at the Jinx Lacey Memorial Library at McNeil High School, and this is Let's Talk About Books. So we're talking about nonfiction, and speaking of non-proliferation and the atomic bomb, this is Spies, and really, on August 14th, 1945, the day that World War II officially ends, Japan has surrendered, World War II has officially ended, a woman named Elizabeth Bentley walks into the FBI headquarters in New Haven, Connecticut, and she turns herself in as a Russian spy. She is about as white bread American as you can get, but she had fallen in love with a Russian. and became a spy for Russia. And we know, obviously, Hitler and Mussolini are dead, but our real rising enemy is Joseph Stalin, and he has two things that he really wants to do. He is desperate to get his hands on the secrets of how to build an atomic bomb, and he wants to spread communism throughout the world. And so what this book details are the links that the American and the Russian agencies went to make sure that secrets weren't traded, and of course they were. Decades before we even realized what was happening. And it's fascinating. It is all the stuff of black and white Hollywood movies, clandestine meetings on bridges at midnight to exchange prisoners, and Checkpoint Charlie, and lipstick cameras, and there's even a family who used their baby carriage. The mother would go sit in a park and wait for the info drop in like a cigarette pack. He would drop it into the baby's carriage, and they would just go about their day.
So it's like The Americans.
It is. So the cover is very much even like The Americans, if that's the TV show that you watch.
It does remind me.
Yes, exactly. So it's fascinating to read all of the things that they went through. And we were all still getting the information anyway. And what's interesting, towards the end of the book, it really does talk about, we felt like in the late 80s, early 90s, like the Cold War had ended, except it really didn't. And obviously now we know we are back full swing in the Cold War. And all of these, these are the very things that we're talking about right now. But if you read Spies, then you'll get the information from the get-go, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, that's great. I love The Americans.
Yes.
Totally want to read that book. All right, I think we're coming close to running out of time.
I think so.
So I just wanted to let the audience know that I love the fact that The Office is still a thing, and we have a lot of books written by people who were in the office. We've got Mindy Kaling's books. We have Dwight Rainn Wilson's book, Ellie Kemper's book, and of course I'm holding this up. Jenna Fisher's book, which is way overdue. So if you have Jenna Fisher's book, please return it. But we have these books written by Office cast members. And another, I guess, TV tie-in, if you will. I really, even though it's here, I wasn't really planning on discussing it, but just very quickly, Modern Love. I could read every Modern Love column in the New York Times and I would be happy. And so what they've done is they've gotten the best of the Modern Love and put them in this compilation. And it is currently showing on Amazon. They made films about 6 of the stories. But when I was single, I loved reading Modern Love. And now that I'm married, I love reading Modern Love. Because even if the relationships don't necessarily end happily ever after, what's good to know is that every ending isn't necessarily a bad thing. And that we all move on and learn from everything we go through. And so anyone who's interested in stories of the heart or just humanity would love these Modern Love stories. And they're not just romantic, they're stories about a woman who gave her son up for adoption, a couple trying to adopt, friendships. They're really just about love in the heart, period. And everyone has a heart. Right. Who wouldn't want to read this?
Well, I'm taking it down a notch. Sorry. But I wanted to show you, this is the book that I'm currently reading.
Yes, I want to read.
It's called Say Nothing, A True Story of Murder and Memory in Northern Ireland. This is on all of the best of reading lists for 2019. And I loved watching Dairy Girls on Netflix. I don't know if anybody'd watched that, but it is hysterical.
You told me to watch it.
It's hysterical. It is a story about a group of teenagers growing up in the 90s during the Troubles in Ireland. And so I've been really interested about what the conflict was. And also with Brexit, a lot of people are questioning what's going to happen in Ireland when Brexit takes place, actually. So really, I'm only about 30 pages into the book, but you can see I've already been making a lot of notes because it's just really fascinating. And the book catches you from the beginning because right from chapter 1, it tells you the story of a woman who in December of 1972 Her name is Jean McConville, and she is a widowed mother of 10 children. And she is literally drugged from her tenement while her children are clinging to her legs. And they drag her out of her apartment, and the last thing she says to her kids is, "Make sure that you watch the children until I come back." And she is never heard from again. And so you get the idea of how this particular focus, just from that separation, it was just terrible. And a lot of people are kind of concerned about what's going to happen with Brexit and whether or not this might kind of come back into play. So I'm in the middle of reading it. I can let you know more about it, but check it out. Saying That Thing on all the top.
You have to know about Brexit.
You do not have to know about Brexit.
Okay, good. And then finally, I wanted to point out that the Topaz list put up by the Texas Library Association has a list of the best nonfiction of the year from adult all the way down to kindergarten. So if you're really into nonfiction, you want to check out the Topaz list, which is on txla.org, and we can also link it to our website.
And Laura got to talk about her obsession with The Office, but I just wanted to let my Liverpool fan club members know that you will never walk alone in our library. We've got Mo Salah, we've got Bring the Noise, the Jurgen Klopp story, we've got Stephen Gerrard's biography. You will find all of your, he is hot. And also a good footballer.
Okay.
Yes. And a good manager for a Scotland team right now. But we've got a great variety of nonfiction books in the library. I'm always amazed at all the different stories that you can find in the library. You just have to come and ask. We are happy to help you find books, or you can use the catalog. So,
Great. So thank you for joining us.
woohoo!